Thank you for joining the session today, which is titled Role of Data, Technology and Innovation for More Inclusive M&E Practices. To achieve growth, to achieve development, it is important that we include everybody. It is important that nobody is left behind. Inclusive growth itself is multidimensional and it requires different data points to judge and measure the policy's effectiveness and efficiency. With proliferation of technology and innovation, there is consumption of data, and the consumption of data leaves different data footprints. The rise of big data, emerging technologies, and innovation approaches offer immense opportunities to augment existing practices, to measure the performance of schemes, to ensure that they are equally distributed and more inclusive. Data-driven innovation can be transformative as it provides plethora of opportunities to improve decision making, make more informed policies, and strengthen economies by reducing waste of, or rather improving services. Monitoring and evaluation being an integral part of any program life cycle has a key role in ensuring all voices are heard and catered to. This session will focus on advent of data, advent of technology, and see how it can be leveraged to enhance the monitoring and evaluation practice. Today, to join us on the panel, we have an eclectic panel group of people, a government official, an academician, an expert of an international repute. First, let me introduce Linda Raftery. Linda is an independent consultant focused on ethical use of technologies and digital data in international development, human rights, and humanitarian contexts. She's currently working with MasterCard Foundation on technology-enabled monitoring and evaluation in various geographies. The Asia Foundation, also where she's associated with, she's responsible for data policies and practices and has worked closely with UNHCR on digital approaches for adolescent and mental health programming of adolescents. In the past, Linda has supported CARE, Humanity United, Farm Radio, Girls Who Code, and USAID to develop and implement data principles, policies, guidelines, and practices. Prior to being an independent consultant, she worked for 16 years in various programming and strategic roles across Africa and Central America and United States. Linda organizes annual Multech conference, which explores how new technologies, digital data, new technologies, and is focused around digital data. To support the panel, along with Linda Raftery, is an eminent and outstanding IAS officer, Mr. Santosh Mishraji. Santosh Mishraji was an IAS officer and served as a member of Indian Administrative Service in key assignments in the government and has made significant contribution to public policy and governance. Before joining IAS, he worked with Bell Labs, AT&T Bell Labs in the US, in the wireless and mobile communication divisions, and holds 3 patents on VLSI design granted by US Patent and Trademark Office. He's an expert on public policy and governance. He has deep technology background and over 25 years of experience. He is considered as a global innovation and technology thought leader. He was responsible for conceiving, architecting, and delivering e-governance solutions at scale using data analytics and artificial intelligence and blockchain. He has authored India's first safe and ethical AI policy and co-authored India's first blockchain policy for Tamil Nadu. Santosh Mishraji is currently an adjunct professor in the area of decision science and information system at IIM Nagpur. He holds an MS from University of Minnesota and a BTech from IIT Kanpur. Along with Mr. Santosh Mishra, we have Mr. Prashant Mittal. Mr. Prashant Mittalji is a Deputy Director General at National Informatics Center and is currently working as a Managing Director of National Information Center Services Incorporated. He sees technology as a utility and is a firm believer of the fact that technology has an enormous potential for improved quality of life. Having spent more than 32 years in delivering ICT solutions consistently, he has, to his credit, numerous products and solutions that resulted in improved efficiency and delivered qualities of e-governance, and has also garnered many accolades during his stint in the Ministry of Rural Development. In his current role as Managing Director of Nixie, he is working towards building a strong ecosystem that facilitates growth of startups and at the same time enables the government entities to adopt innovative and emerging technologies for better and informed governance. Academically, Sri Prasad Mittalji has done MSc in Physics with specialization in Electronics and is a postgraduate diploma in Computer Applications and MS in Software Systems, and also an MBA in Project Management. And lastly, we have with us Professor Rudrasen Sarma. Professor Rudrasen Sarma is a professor of economics at the Indian Institute of Management, Kozhikode, where he has held the positions like Dean and Head of Research Office and Head of Economic Area before. He has 20 years of experience in research and teaching. Before joining IIM Kozhikode, he worked for Reserve Bank of India, IIM Lucknow, and University of Birmingham. Professor Sen Sharma's teaching and research interests are macroeconomics, applied econometrics, and economic development. He has published more than 40 papers in international peer-reviewed journals. He has also completed research projects for NABARD, Niti Aayog, and the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. He regularly writes opinion pieces and contributes to the training program for government and corporate bodies. Thank you all for joining our panel discussion today. It's an honor to be the part moderating the panel where you are a part of it. Thank you very much. So let me start with a first question based on to Linda Raftery. Linda, based on your years of experience and research, how do you see the evaluation of technology in the monitoring and evaluation practices? How has it evolved?
Sure. Thanks for having me on the panel today, and I'm excited to be here with all of you. So I've been working in the development in the humanitarian space since about 1994, and we really saw social media and mobile phones come onto the scene around 2008. And so I started looking at technology and development and humanitarian work and the intersection of that back then. So in the early days, 2008, 2010, it was mainly mobile phones. We saw a lot of interest in crowdsourcing, mapping, use of SMS for feedback mechanisms with communities. And so we were really watching this space in around 2014 and saw that people started realizing that all of the ICT for development, all the technology and development programs that were being implemented were also producing quite a lot of data. And that's really when people started to kind of make this connection that monitoring and evaluation could be really supported by digital tools and technologies. And so I was working with Rockefeller Foundation at the time, and they commissioned a paper about this topic. And so we tried to set a baseline, and we saw that there's really what we call a first wave, which is much more technical, much more traditional, sort of doing what we've always done, collecting data, management information systems, that sort of thing. So we really call this kind of traditional moral tech. And so it's kind of very, very, I would say in a way, it's very basic. It's not super innovative, but it's really translating what we used to do on paper to the digital space. Around 2018, we saw what we call the second wave, which was when we started to see people talking quite a lot about big data and thinking about what could we do with big data in the space. Obviously, people had been thinking about big data before that, but it started to make its way more firmly into the monitoring and evaluation space around 2018. But not a lot of organizations are actually doing anything with big data in the development space. It's really an emerging area. And then the third wave that we're starting to see is people thinking about new ways of storing data, thinking about blockchain, as I'm sure my colleague here on the panel will talk about, use of sensors, use of back-end data from apps, more sophisticated combinations of these tools with sort of multi-methods and that sort of thing. So it's really been a quite interesting, sort of trend that we're seeing as moral tech, what we call moral tech, starts to advance and to get more sophisticated in the space. And so, yeah, it's a pretty exciting field.
Thanks, Linda. Thanks. Santosh Mishra, sir, given your previous role as a CEO of Tamil Nadu e-governance agency and current academic experience, what are the current challenges, barriers existing in the Indian context, specifically around Indian context, that you think are there, and how could the state governments or the central government improve to adopt to improve the services to its citizens using technology and effectively use it for M&E? Hello, sir, we can't hear you, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Is it okay now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I'm in the process of shifting my home, so I think some things are all broken, I think, including the internet. So kindly bear with me with all these little inconveniences. So thank you, Ashish ji. And I was saying that I'm very excited to be here and look forward to actually learning from this panel, very, very august panel, which you have put together. So here is what I mean, having served in public sector and private sector, mostly centered around technology, and I have always tried to use technology in whatever public office I have been holding. And so the challenges, and I mean, this is, of course, I'm talking from Indian context, but it also sort of extends to the countries or economies which are in similar stage of evolution. So, I mean, if you look at India, for example, you have several good things happening in the technology area. So, for example, you have this massive penetration of mobile, and the data is really, really very, very cheap. Average speed in India of internet is about 6 Mbps, which is not fantastic, but it works for most of the time. So in fact, that's what I'm using today, as my regular internet connection is disconnected. So I'm using the mobile data, which is fairly good. You have this Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, and mobile trinity, which has come about. So you have almost about 78 to 90, 80%, 70, somewhere, I mean, it depends. So somewhere between 75 to 80% of the citizens in this country have a bank account. So there is a massive transformation which has happened in terms of financial inclusion. You also have this Aadhaar, which is unique ID. So that's a very, very potent enabler we have. So Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, and mobile trinity. And then you have a fantastic payment system called UPI, Unified Payment Interface. Started off in 2016, and today it does about almost 3.6 billion transactions in a month, amounting to almost $1 trillion. This is nowhere in the world, and I think now it's expanding footprint into international payment systems as well. So these are some great things which are happening on the technology side in India. Now, if you look at it, and this I have been struggling a lot, I mean, over my tenure as Commissioner of E-Governance, this was something I was grappling with on a daily basis. So all this is great. And then you have the other stark reality, which is, of course, the network connectivity is improving, but if you go into interiors of Madhya Pradesh, maybe Jharkhand, Khunti, Latehar, maybe some district, Badmer, or maybe even Jhunjhunu in Rajasthan, or maybe Northeast if you travel to East Garo Hill or some district like that, or Pasighat, you will have issues of network connectivity. So this, my favorite quote is that averages reveal, they hide more than what they reveal. So we typically in government, and that is so true for monitoring and evaluation also. I've been a public administrator for a long time. And I know, I mean, how do we monitor schemes? We actually pick up and see, okay, so this is scheme, look at physical target, we have achieved 47%, financial target, we have achieved 75% or 35% or whatever that number is. And they actually end up hiding a lot more than they actually are revealing. And this was what, when we say 1.2 billion mobile connections in India, now let's look at that. Let's look slightly deeper into that. It's 1.2 billion is a great number, but realize that only 400 million of them, which is still a large number, are actually smartphone users. Rest of them are still on that, dial, keypad dial feature phones. And that's the reason why, in fact, we had very recently, and I was so happy to see that RBI has launched UPI 123, which is basically providing the power of unified payment interface to people who do not have access to smartphones. So this is the challenge of this technology. So on one side, you have massive opportunities. You have distributed knowledge. You have this repository called GitHub. You can just go and find any exciting code on AI or smart contracts on blockchain. You can actually, and many of them are generous to give it as open source. So you're free to copy, adopt, modify, use it according to your needs. You can use it for education. We used it for cataract detection. We used AI for developing an app which will just, you take a picture of an eye and it tells you whether there's a cataract or not. I mean, massive force multiplier, massive transformative project opportunities are there. But on the other hand, you have this huge population. So when we in India have this fascination, and I think it's true for similar countries elsewhere as well. We have this fascination with bringing things online. So we say, okay, public service delivery. I brought 50 services online. So whether it is a citizen wanting a birth certificate or a community certificate or a land record copy, it's all online. You can just go and order it. No physical touch points. Driving license, you just go and write an exam online and you download your learner license. Great. You don't even have to visit RTO office. The moment you reduce these touch points, obviously the efficiency goes up, the other related unwanted phenomena goes down, and all looks good. Unfortunately, what we fail to realize is that when we bring things online, they also become exclusive, meaning you need the fundamental premise behind things being online is that someone would have a smartphone, a network, and most importantly, ability to type. So keyboard is a barrier. That's another of my favorite quote. Keyboard is a barrier. In fact, again, so this is something we need to again collectively sit and think through whether when we want to deliver public services, you look at the forms which we have to fill up, right? I mean, if you had to apply for a ration card or a driving license, or so, I mean, this was very recent. I mean, very recently, before I left IAS, I was transport commissioner, and one of the things I was doing was to make this entire driving license process available from home. And when the screens came about, and Mr. Mittal is there from NIC, their team did a fantastic job. The NIC team was doing that. They did a fantastic job. But the problem is that what in private sector we call, I'm sorry if I'm getting taking too long a time. I can come back in the second part of the conversation. Is that
Yes.
better? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, this is a very interesting point that you mentioned about the private sector and the government, because private sector uses the word customers and government use the word citizen, and they have got different connotations completely.
Absolutely. I think you absolutely rightly said that. And in fact, the moment we do that customer journey mapping, which the private sector does regularly, I think we will have a total transformation in public service delivery.
Yes.
Sorry for taking longer time, but
No problem, sir.
next opportunity.
And interestingly, you spoke about also about it is true about whom, not whom do we include, but making sure that we don't exclude anybody when we do monitoring and evaluation of policies. So, Mr. Prashant Mittalji, where do you think in terms of government of India's rollout of technology, your career over a few decades, or rollout of technology, what have been the key milestones for the country, and how has it evolved in the Indian context?
Am I audible? Oh,
Yes, you
Yes.
are.
firstly, I would like to thank DMEO for making me part of this August panel. And as we have been supporting government right from my district posting till at Delhi to the apex office in government, we have been supporting these type of activities, and I think the government has graduated from facts based. We have lived that era also, when we were collecting the different reports over facts and getting those compiled and putting before the administrator or the superiors for taking the decision. So from that level to API and AI based alert generation, it has been very long journey, and I think it has been supported by all stakeholders and technology as well. So government of India is also foreseeing multiple trillion economy, and we have graduated from the data-based, is, I think, monitoring or planning to evidence-based planning. So that has been a substantial increment as far as the management and development process is concerned. So when we were doing a lot many projects in MORD, so the biggest evidence was that, and it is not only my data, it has been testified by one of very prominent institution also, that average house completion has been reduced from 370 days to 117 days. So that has been remarkable, and we could achieve it with the multiple efforts. Right from, as sir has pointed out, there has been challenges for the internet percolation. So we saw that at least every block should be having good level of network, and mobile thing made our life more easier. And it has been very I think encouraging that all the governments, right from as length and breadth are concerned, they have adopted things. And YouTube also helped us, because when we released the training videos, people used to translate in Bhojpuri and the local dialect, and they started doing those things, and we could reach to citizen within 7 days. I think this is very remarkable assistance from the non-government players. So, government is also taking help from all the partners, and I could see that the systems like e-way bill, PFMS, UIDI, Arogya Setu, Land Record, eShram, Narega, PMGSY, PMKSY. There are a lot many numbers are there. Where when we count and we tell the numbers to some international, on some international platform, they just get amazed. Oh, you are serving 130 million people for that purpose. For them, because 13 crore translated to 130 million in Narega. So for them, it is larger than two countries put together as a population is concerned. So, and biggest challenge for us is diversity in landscape, diversity of language, diversity of culture, and economic, I think, strata. Another thing is, which is very important, as sir has said, we have to serve very diverse geography. There are stations which are not served with even with the electricity. Right now, we claim that we have reached to every village, but they are using solar panel to charge their phone and they could access the information. So all the stakeholders are helping us. I think we have done a lot, but longer path is way forward.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I mean, it is interesting you talked about diversity because that's where, as Santosh Mishraji rightly said, averages hide more than they reveal. And Professor Sen Sarma, as an econometrician, I'm sure you would have your own views on law of averages. So, as an ex-regulator and an academician and an econometrician, what would you say that, would you say has been the evolution of analytics in particularly using alternative data for policy making, for monitoring and evaluation? Where have you seen the journey evolve from a academics perspective as well as from a regulatory perspective?
Good afternoon, Ashish, fellow panelists and participants. Thank you, DMEO, for inviting me. As we know, we are living in the most data-rich point in human history, thanks to technology, transactions, and connectedness. Now, using technology, I think monitoring and evaluation practitioners have done a great job in monitoring programs and tracking their performance. But I'm not so sure that that has happened in the space of evaluation. So when we talk of monitoring and evaluation, we sometimes use these two terms together, but I think we need to carefully separate out the two. Now, in the inaugural session today morning, I was listening with great interest to Dr. Anant Nageshwaran, who actually flagged the difference between monitoring and evaluation. But his pitch was that they should be done together. My submission is that we need to separate them out and think about each more carefully. Because when we are talking of monitoring, we are talking of tracking performance continuously, which is important because we are able to track the current status, which helps to take remedial action, which makes for agile policy implementation. And this is something which monitoring and evaluation practitioners have done an excellent job with. So technology has been leveraged for content analysis, descriptive analysis, qualitative analysis, mapping, developing dashboards. So all this gives us an idea of what is happening real time. So this part is happening. But I feel that we now need to focus on the second part, that is evaluation, because evaluation is important to generate recommendations for the future. Should we scale up the program? Is it replicable in other places? So what about technology for evaluation? Now, some M&E practitioners have used analytics. Now, when you use the term analytics, typically we think of predictive analytics. And that has been used. Training of data sets or machine learning algorithms have been used to predict the behavior of certain samples. For example, what is likely to happen? Which student is likely to drop out from the school? Which town is likely to face civil strife or violence, so that action can be taken. However, predictive analytics is only one step in filling the evidence gap as far as evaluation is concerned, because predictive analytics depends on patterns and correlations, and predictive analytics cannot imply causation. In other words, we cannot attribute changes in the outcomes to a particular program intervention. So therefore, the relevant question that I am coming to now is rigorous impact evaluation, which I think is missing. So, the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2019 went to experimental designs. The Nobel Prize in Economics in 2021 went to scholars who worked with quasi-experiments. So this is something I would like to see happening. Mr. Santosh Mishra previously cautioned against relying on average data. I would say that monitoring and evaluation practitioners must also guard against spurious correlation, because what you observe may not be because of a causal mechanism. What you observe could be simply accidental. It could be because of sample selection bias. It could be because of some missing observation or a missing variable which is acting as a confounder, which we are not able to capture. In fact, I would highly recommend Julia Pearl, who is a computer scientist. He has an excellent book called The Book of Why, where he argues that the difference between human beings and robots or artificial intelligence is that machines cannot yet infer causality, but human beings can leverage technology to infer causality. So to summarize, I think there is a plethora of statistical and econometric techniques, starting with in-field lab experiments, randomized control trials, or even quasi-experiments such as matching methods, difference in difference methods, regression discontinuity design. Now, some people have criticized these techniques also for being too narrow in focus, but I think the literature is evolving. These methods have been mixed with qualitative methodologies to improve so that we can tell more about program evaluation. So this is what I would conclude by urging the experts to look at second part, that is evaluation beyond just monitoring. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you. Linda, I mean, I saw you smiling and nodding when Professor was talking about causality and using technology. So based on your experience in various geographies, how have you seen evolution, the M&E community, using data derived out of technology and for analysis and using different tools and techniques? So one, depending on field surveys, but also triangulating it with other data points to come up with inferences and causality. How have you seen it pan out over the last decade or so?
Sure, thanks. We did a paper last year, four papers, where we tried to come up with an overarching understanding of what was going on with the M&E community. And what we found was that that the M&E side has been a little bit slow in adopting newer technologies and approaches. And I think that's for a mix of reasons. I think maybe three main reasons. I think first, a lot of the areas that we're working, a lot of the organizations that we're working with, governments we're working with, have low technological capacity, insufficient resources, poor connectivity. And so if we're thinking about the types of communities that we're trying to reach out to and we do monitoring and evaluation, typically they're also more vulnerable and have much lower connectivity. So that's been one issue, is just really the issue of capacity and resources for integrating technologies. And then I think also as people who are interested in research and monitoring and evaluation, participatory processes, we have a focus on methodology and a focus on process, a focus on community involvement and participation. And so when you bring in some of these really top-down types of data collection methods and analytics, you see evaluators having concerns around ethics, around bias, around inclusion, which everyone's been talking about already today. And then I think also there's very little work to conduct monitoring and evaluation on the use of technologies in monitoring and evaluation. So we don't really know, is it more cost effective? Are we getting better quality data? Are we making better decisions? There's insufficient kind of documentation and research of our own selves and our own work. So I think that's where some of the hesitation is coming from, and we've heard about causation, poor quality data, which methods are most appropriate, and that sort of thing. Now, this really changed quite a lot with COVID. The hesitancy changed a lot with COVID because we were forced to start using distance methods and remote methods for data collection. And so I've done some work on that as well. Again, the idea was that we could reach more people, we could save money, if we used remote methodologies using mobile phones, or reaching out to folks with these remote methodologies, or we could use big data and predictive analytics, reuse of secondary data, reuse of open data. So all these kind of newer, more interesting ways of data use have really come to the forefront. But at the same time, there are still all these questions, underlying questions. And some of the questions that come up quite a lot when we think about remote monitoring and evaluation are around, as we've heard already today, inclusion, exclusion, who's included in these data sets, whose voices are being heard. And that's everywhere from the community, but also which organizations have the capabilities and the capacities to then be involved in monitoring and evaluation when we move to very high tech types of approaches. And so we're also excluding organizations, community level organizations, country level organizations, when we have such a strong focus on technology. There's also issues of safety. There are certain topics that are just not very safe to conduct remote monitoring and evaluation on, for example, gender-based violence, because you don't know if a woman is alone in her home when we're talking to her on the phone. It's very difficult to sort of gauge any potential secondary harm that might happen if we're collecting data on quite sensitive topics that would include issues around child protection, family, domestic violence, and that sort of thing. There are issues of trust building. So it's much harder to build trust with someone when we're trying to do it through a screen. Much easier when you're in the community, face-to-face, meeting people, talking to people, sitting down next to someone and having a conversation with them. The type of data you get might be quite different than if you're trying to ask someone who's never used a Zoom setting before to talk to you over Zoom, for example. It's very alienating sometimes. And then the last two areas that we've looked at quite a lot are amongst evaluators I've spoken with who've been working on remote M&E, there's a lack of confidence in the data quality that's collected because we don't have these enough sort of tertiary methods to kind of make us feel confident that the data we're collecting remotely or using technology is valid. And then the last one is data protection. So we see that as we collect more and more data from very vulnerable people all around the world, most monitoring and evaluation professionals have very low understanding of data privacy, data protection, how to keep data safe. We send spreadsheets around by email with very highly sensitive information about individuals all the time. And so those are some of the areas that that have been raised with concern to the shift over to remote digital monitoring and evaluation and digital data collection.
Thanks, Linda. You spoke interesting 2 points. One point was on different maturity levels of countries and governments in technology, and you also did refer to COVID. So coming back to the Indian context, Santosh Mishra sir, based on, we have a process, we have a technology implementation, but when an exogenous shocks like COVID comes in, they are tested, and one has to be agile to evaluate policies at short time intervals and do the necessary adjustments so that most of the citizens are included. What has been the challenges, your own experience as an administrator, as the chairman or in charge of Tamil Nadu e-governance? What were the challenges that you saw while implementing in such a scenario?
Thank you. And of course, the COVID was such a shock. I mean, none of us were prepared for. And so for me, the immediate challenge, of course, it became because my entire whatever, so one, of course, you had your office shut, but at the same time, for COVID monitoring, government needed a lot of support. So whether it was in terms of monitoring outbreaks or identifying hotspots, and we did our best and we pulled resources together. We, in fact, in that time, we actually collaborated with telecom company BSNL, with IIT Madras, created an IVRS system. And again, that comes back to the point of inclusion. So what happened was that you had this CoWIN app, and you had to it was meant for disseminating information, and you could actually answer a bunch of questions, and it will sort of, and this was, remember, this was not like second wave or third wave. This was the very first wave when very few people knew what COVID was, and you had these visuals on television which showed, and WhatsApp, I mean, huge amount of WhatsApp forwards visuals saying this is a recording from China, and the guy was standing, and then suddenly he just crashes on the footpath and is dead. And this was creating such a big panic and such a big worry in the minds of people that you wanted to actually create a mechanism where they could sort of get some assurance that they are not having symptoms of COVID. And so this smart app, I mean, if you could download this app and you could answer your, I mean, it was keeping track of your well-being and all that. But what do you do to reach out to people who do not have access to the to a smartphone? So we created an IVRS system where people could actually. So this was what I was doing during that period. We created a system where people called up and actually gave a missed call. In India, that's a very popular concept. I don't know if Western countries have that, but I think missed call is a concept where you communicate without actually communicating. So missed call is you just give a call, and then after it rings once, you just disconnect it. And the person who got the call, he understands why the call had come. So in this case, we created a missed call mechanism and sort of, borrowing from behavioral science as well. So people could just call this number, and the system then called them back. And we sat down with the health department, designed a series of questions, about 13 questions, which could be responded in 1, 2, 3. So you could just dial that number, and then it will collect that information, classify it, self-classify it into orange, red, orange, and green, and send the alerts appropriately to the district control rooms and state control rooms, and make sure that people who report that they have some sort of a symptom, they'll be made some care will be given, somebody will reach out to them, make sure that they're isolated, etc., etc. So that was what we were doing during the Corona times. I mean, our regular work, of course, came to a grinding halt. So we were all busy with this. And then there was a massive need for control of movement. So movement regulation. So that was another task which was given to us. While you wanted to regulate the movement, you also wanted the essential services to run. So, so initially it was just the essential services, medicines and milk and, water. And then slowly they said, no, some bare essential industries like food processing industry and, oil processing industry and continuous process industries, which cannot be shut down. They need to be run. So if you have a, smelter going on and you have whatever, so you can't really shut it down. So that kept on, the requirement kept on changing. And as the, the virulence of the virus and as the infection rates grew, as the, so every time there was a jump up or down, accordingly the responses were tweaked. So this is what we were doing during the Corona times, and that was what was our prime responsibility.
Sure. So, I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, the key takeaway that I get from what you just mentioned is that innovation is necessarily not using an app. Innovation is also using basic technology to reach maximum people when it comes to M&E. But along with that was a coupled algorithm that actually triggered red, orange. Hello. Yes, sorry, and this is where there was a challenge in the network. I had to switch over my network. So, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, I was at not just the smartphone, but also the technology. And what you also mentioned about collaborative approach of using phone companies and other ecosystems to come up with solutions. That is interesting, and which comes to a question which I would like to pose to Professor Rudra Singh Sarma on, when we talk about alternative technologies and data points derived out of technologies, we have got mobility, we have got nightlight data. What are the biggest challenges do you see in using these data for the application? As an econometrician, what are the challenges that what would you foresee?
Yeah, Ashish, before the challenges, a quick word on the opportunities. So I was just thinking about something like the multi-poverty index, which Niti Aayog has done an excellent job in creating. Some such survey-based data can actually be combined with technology generated data to provide richer insights. So there's a lot of opportunity there. So I recently read a few papers where researchers have combined things like what you said, nightlight data or satellite imagery, rainfall, spatial data, and they combined it with the available survey-based administrative data to generate things like poverty estimates at very micro levels, household level or village level. So, these are excellent opportunities of using these new kinds of data sets. What are the challenges? So, I think a couple of things were already flagged by Linda before. So, there could be sensitive topics, there could be ethical issues, privacy issues, costs are not yet clear. One of the things is that could be difficult to measure behavioral changes using technology. Of course, people are working with things like facial detection software to capture even behavioral changes, which can supplement survey responses. Then you may not be able to capture voice of the vulnerable, the less accessible. We may not be able to capture nonlinear effects. We may not be able to capture the causal feedback mechanisms by purely relying on technology. So I think using technology brings its challenges, which we also need to deal with to be able to effectively use it.
Yeah, what you said is true. It's not just important to behavioral change of not only knowing uh, why, but also how. How does it impact? And that's important because when your interventions are made, it is also the citizen behavior comes into play of using those interventions, and which and an intervention or a policy, I would say, is many a times top down driven, and it's a integration of policy, regulation, and technology. Both have to work together to effectively make an impact. So coming to Prashant Mittal ji, who has been part of implementing various technologies across in his career, I would have a question, but I would divide it into two parts. First part is that how do you see from a policy perspective the policymaker giving guidance to NIC or NICSI in terms of rolling out technology in making sure that it is inclusive, making sure that everybody, as Santosh Mishra sir mentioned about using basic phone to ensure that we reach out during COVID. So what has been the experience from a policymaker and the guidance given for implementation? And if you could just share some of your experiences on how did you take citizen feedback, or what is the process involved in taking citizen feedback to make sure that it is the technology that is being designed is inclusive, and then that can be leveraged further. Over to you, Santosh Mishra. Prashant Mittal.
Actually, when we started this type of support, I should mention one saying in Rajasthan, भैंस भैंस को कांकड़ा और सरकार को आंकड़ा. This was the saying in Rajasthan. So we graduated from that to till today, when our political bosses are talking about open data, despite knowing that data is new oil, they are advocating for decision support system, open data, and data-driven governance. So completely 360 as a 180-degree perception has changed in government, and we are talking about dashboard of dashboards. We have developed recently for Apex Office one of the dashboard, such dashboard of Prayas. So naturally, when they saw the benefit of such experiments, they start adopting it. And when we talk about such system, there is a like customer and citizen. I think we have to graduate from citizen to partners in development. So we should be treating our citizens as partner in development, because if we have developed citizen at the last mile, I think we will ourselves build a developed country. So what we did in evidence-based planning, we have supported government, and we have supported policymaker in reaping the benefit of technology. I could see that many smart cities are using IoT for data collection, which has brought down the data collection cost considerably. But that is only up to a fashion level things, what is happening today. We have to graduate from that thing to real use of technology, and I think soon we will be reaching to that point when we shall be getting the data from the field level or the grassroots level or the last mile directly to our servers, and we shall be able to build those systems very fast. And what we felt in government and how we supported policy makers, as my role in NIC in Ministry of Rural Development, I should, if time is permitted, I should just take half a minute of one experience. We were having many rejections of our DBT transactions. So we ranked all the banks with respect to those rejections. And within 2 months, we have got a considerable reduction, and every bank was striving to come at number 1 or number 2 like that. So when we start gauging those things with respect to their performance with the help of data, it certainly helps us. And part 2 of your question was which are the systems. I think in the difficult time of Corona, 2 systems I should say have helped the government a lot. First one is e-office. You and I were able to clear the files over e-office from our home when lockdown was there. And second thing is PFMS. Both these systems keep government rolling, and there was no visible effect of lockdown over government process, though we have encountered some losses which are not repairable. But yes, technology helped government, and it is a wonderful thing that in a country like India, in certain quarters, we are having far more mature system than developed economy. So this is one of the commendable things which our country has reached with all the help of administration, our NIC team, my team. Everyone is working, and I think we shall be reaching to new height very soon.
Thank you, sir. And you mentioned about using technology for capturing IoTs and other tools. So, Linda, coming back to you, what are the technologies that one MERL practitioner should be using, or rather, what should be they aware of or need to do when they choose the technology? What are the things that are a checklist that we should be aware of for using technology for M&E?
That's a big question. I think first we want to be sure that we're being driven by questions and not by technology tools. So we've seen it every time there's a new technology that comes out. You see everyone saying, how can we use drones to do this? How can we use big data to do this? How can we use this to do that? And I think first we need to know what are our questions? What are we trying to find out? What do we need to know? What data will help us know what we need to know? And then what are the right tools for capturing that data in ways that we're sure that it's going to be inclusive and it's going to be, objective as possible. So I think we need to know our population quite well. We need to understand, how do they communicate? How do they use technology? How do they use devices? And we've heard some statistics today about smartphones versus feature phones. What are people comfortable with? Who do they trust? Everything from knowing if you're going to do a survey over a mobile phone, you know, how much data is it going to require someone to have on their phone? How much memory do they need to have on their phone in order to participate in something? Who has ownership of phones at community level? Is it the husband? You know, there's so many details that we need to understand when we're designing a data collection process with communities. And then I think we need to always test those assumptions. So we make quite a lot of assumptions when we're working from outside. And so how do we test the assumptions and make sure, how do we pilot data collection tools or pilot different approaches that we're using? I think we always want to offer alternatives. So if we're designing, you know, we can design a big remote data collection or a big digital data collection survey or something like that. But then what about, you know, I think the statistics now are that, you know, 67% of the global population has at least some access to internet. Okay, so what about the other 33%, if I'm doing my math right? Who is that 33% and how do we reach them and how do we supplement the information we can get through digital with other types of methodologies? Triangulation and diversification of data sources is really important. And then we have this idea of elite capture, meaning that we tend to capture those who are more elite when we're using digital tools and using the internet. So how do we avoid elite capture? There's also something that we saw quite a lot during COVID, which is referred to as convenient sampling. So maybe you've got a project that's running in 4 districts and you're saying, okay, well, this district doesn't really have very good internet coverage. So we'll do our monitoring and evaluation in the other 3 districts and we'll skip that one. And that's your sampling for convenience because you're sampling based on who has access to digital, and then you're leaving out those who don't. And there might be very different realities amongst those who are connected and those who aren't. I think checking your algorithms for bias is really important, understanding that sort of black box that sometimes comes up when we're using big data and machine learning. And then another piece that I think is important is the diversity on your teams. If your team is all male or your team is all external or your team is all from one background, one cultural background, one religious background, one ethnic background, you're also going to have bias on your teams in terms of how you're designing and how you're understanding data. So really making sure that your teams are diverse. And then a last thing that's come up a lot, even in the work that I do around privacy, is how do evaluators make sure that we're not contributing to surveillance, kind of overreach of constant surveillance. And because we work in the humanitarian and the development space, at least I do, there are a lot of concerns that only certain populations are being subjected to consistent surveillance and that poor communities are more surveilled through technologies and through data capture and collection than wealthier communities. So I think we come back to our ethics as people who are involved in you know, spaces where we want to be equitable. We want to look at justice and fairness, and at least in the development space, those are the kinds of values that we work with. So making sure that what we're doing is not causing more harm than good. So those are some things that I think about, at least when I'm thinking about technology and monitoring and evaluation.
What you said is true. People need to be more focused and on their objective rather than just being enamored by technology. Sometimes a simple technology can do the trick. While you spoke about, you know, leaving out the citizens and who cannot use technology, coming to Santosh Mishra sir, as a administrator, you know, there are different departments, and we spoke about triangulation of data, but there are many times the databases are in silos and it cannot be used for triangulation. So what has been your experience on breaking these silos and initiatives like blockchain and distributed ledger that you had undertaken in the state government? Can you just share your experiences around that?
Sure, I think it's very crucial to have us, and it's not only about Tamil Nadu. I think most of the governments, including Government of India, has this problem. I think it's the departments they hold it like their empire, and I think they have a great difficulty in understanding, and even I think it's also simply a lack of trust. I think they're worried sometimes. Of course, there is a genuine worry that it could be misused, the data access may be unauthorized, and then there is a worry that somebody will look at it and sort of find fault with us. I mean that's so. I mean I'll tell you an example. We were looking at uh, public distribution system transaction data, and um, and this is where I think inclusive monitoring is very important. See, if you look at typical reporting mechanisms, I mean, all the reports come back to you are more or less, pretty good. I mean, you had 95% offtake of ration this month. You feel happy, and advanced liftment has gone on, and I think almost 30% of the movement is already over even before the month began. So, I mean, all looks great, but actually and in fact, as Rudra was saying, I think you have a huge the data which is coming in is just too big and too huge for us to actually manually handle or sieve through. So you need some good analytical tools. So we took this data from public distribution system, put it through an analyzer, and very interestingly, so we just took a plot of weekly offtake of ration shops in a particular district, and the district typically has 800 to 1,000 ration shops. And it was very interesting. There was one ration shop. So all the ration shops will have a very kind of and expectedly in the beginning of the month, there will be a peak of offtake of rations. I mean, people will sort of, buy in the beginning of the month, and then it will kind of taper down. In between, there might be some spikes depending on seasonality, festivals and etc. And then there was one shop which was like all flat throughout this, and then suddenly there will be a step function, and then it will remain flat. And this was consistently happening over a couple of months. And obviously there was something wrong. So this could not happen. Obviously, the entire other reporting mechanism did not capture it, and this was it. It could have been that this particular shop was serving some of the most. And I liked what Linda said. She said that you capture the elite, and that's what was happening. So and so 95% all okay, 5% there's a problem. I mean, so this was a shop probably serving a habitation or a set of people or a set of families who did not even have mechanism to actually raise their voice against something going wrong. And that was caught by the data, saying that, oh, there is an anomaly here. Everybody else has this, band of take percentage, whereas this particular shop has a step function, and go look at it. So this is the problem, and I think that's part of the reason why government departments are so unwilling to share data with each other. I think so. What we did was we brought out a data exchange platform. It's called State Family Database, and the idea was to actually, again, it's a federated data structure. So it's not like blockchain data where you have actual physical copies of data floating around everywhere, but it is a federated data structure where you have hooks into all the databases. So you have and in fact it was very acceptable to the departments also, because they felt empowered in that sense that, okay, my data remains with me. So we said it's fine. I mean, I'll just connect a pipeline into your database, and there will be hooks, and they will be connecting all the other 34 or 35 databases which we have, and make sure that you can, and of course you can access, and of course there are protocols for access and levels of access, etc. But the advantage was that you could actually do a much better delivery of services if this could come through. So this was the State Family Database project, and it's on. I think we have almost moved about 50% of the work, and another 50%, I guess, is on. I'm of course no longer there, but that was the idea. So to break the silos, connect all these data, couple them loosely so that there is less resistance from the departments. At the same time, the confidence in data, which the government has, is pretty high. So that was our version of this. And of course, the blockchain was on a different level. And of course, that was again sort of not really a DLT, which is it was, I mean, the way we had designed was on a Hyperledger framework. So probably it's a permission blockchain. So, but that's how we were trying to handle this.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. So, just in the interest of time, we will just pick up few questions that have been posted in the chat box, and then come back for closing remarks. So, one question that has been posted by Charlo is, how do you see use of data and analytics from a social sector perspective, and how can that be leveraged? And this is directed to Professor Rudra Singh sir.
Yeah. Firstly, apologies, Charlo. I saw your question, but I responded with a different answer, which was intended for someone else. But glad that Ashish brought it up. So I think there have been many case studies documented. For example, I mean, way back in 2007, actually, Robert Jensen published a paper in Quarterly Journal of Economics showing that when you provided data on the mobile phones of fishermen in Kerala who are in the high seas, it helps them to reduce their risk and improve the price that they get for their produce. So that's one application. More recently, I have seen papers using artificial intelligence and machine learning to capture, for example, electronic health records data to do advanced risk assessment in psychotic patients. AI and ML tools are being used to identify potentially problematic content on the internet, which could cause violence against women and children. So these are just some examples, but there is so much happening. But just one final point that, this is happening mainly on the monitoring side, which gives you an early warning signal, but not so much on the program evaluation side.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Professor. The next question directed towards Prashant Mittalji is, from a central agency perspective, how do you see interoperability in data systems, be it between two ministries or between two administrative bodies, or at a federated level between state and the center? What is happening from that perspective?
Yeah, actually, when we talk about the value of data, what Mr. Mishra has told, the captive nature among the silos have resulted in silos. No ministry wanted to share their data, but there is a phase change. Now we are sharing our data, and we have placed all our data in rural development on our portals, and you can see everything which has happened up to last days 12 hours, 24 hours time is available at 10 a.m. next day. So that is the change. Silos are breaking. The technology has also supported in comparing the data set or the progress among one ministry to another. As we have implemented metadata standards, we had implemented local government directory. So across all government programs, every village is known as a number, unique number. So you can see how the PDS system is doing in that village as compared to Narega job requirement or PM Jani Suraksha Yojana performance, like that. All the department, if they use the same denominator, you will get the good comparison of that thing. So another thing which I think government is also working very interestingly towards enterprise architecture, when they are standardizing their building blocks. So within next 5 years or 7 years, we shall be having all the IT systems among those so-called silos talking to each other. And that open platform, open technology, open data will also enable us to reach that point.
Okay, thank you, sir. So there are a few questions coming, but in the interest of time, maybe we can just do a quick wrap up. and have some closing remarks from each one of you. So, firstly, Santosh Mishra sir, can you just summarize where you see the role of technology in M&E towards bringing in a different perspective, towards bringing in agility? Where do you see that role?
So as I started off saying that the monitoring or even evaluation for that matter, I think the averages have to be, we have to move out of that frame. And I think the technology can be a very, very important tool in including people who have been typically left out of government programs and policies. So while we can see that, oh, I have got 98% coverage for houseless, or 95% coverage for health insurance for people below poverty line, you would be surprised that there are still right out there, right in front of your eyes, families living without these facilities or without the benefits of these schemes. So it's important for us to have tools and technologies or even proxy evaluation mechanisms for ensuring that we know exactly who are left out.
Thank you, sir. Linda, you mentioned about different biases coming in, because of inherent skill sets or different perspective, people from the same religion, people from the same background coming in and doing. So, can you just summarize for us how do you see intermingling of technology, different backgrounds, different experiences coming together to do an effective M&E? How do you see that playing out?
I mean, I think first, it's really important to have a theory of change behind your evaluation and behind your programming, and really not sort of going off and doing big data and AI without really understanding, again, the questions, the theory that's been posited. I think representation and representativity is really critical, as everyone's been saying today, around issues around inclusion. Mixed methods and triangulation can also help to make sure that we're seeing the full picture. And then I really think it's a good idea for the social sector, folks with the social sector and social science background, to connect over with those who are working in government administration and working in programmatic implementation, with those who have this more advanced knowledge around data analytics and data science, and sort of how do we create more spaces where those different perspectives can come together, and kind of build on the strengths of everyone and come up with a shared approach to things. And so I think that's really where I hope we can go with the field, is bringing in these different strands of knowledge that are so critical to the work that we're doing now, and not to mention community perspectives as well.
Sure. Thanks, Linda. Prashant Mittalji, where do you see the way forward for India's e-governance?
I should say that when we are getting some leeway of using some Aadhaar related thing, when we can compare how we are rendering benefit to our citizen, and whether one citizen is having all the benefits, or where are the loop cavities still left. If we can reach to that level, I think that would be the golden day for e-governance.
And lastly, Professor, any closing thoughts or remarks on how the policymaker, industry, and academia, who may more often than not actually triangulate together, what should be done? How can they collaborate to make effective use of technology for M&E?
I'll go back to what Linda said about the importance of theory of change. So I think, working with academia can bring that theoretical perspective, so that the data analysis does not become merely technology driven or atheoretic or spurious. So I think collaboration can bring data, technology, and expertise together. So I think there's a need to do joint research, joint capacity building for mutual understanding and shared expertise.
Thank you, Professor. So, just key takeaways from the panel that I see is, what we spoke about is focusing on inclusivity, and not just believing in law of averages. And beautiful example by Santosh Mishra sir on how uh, those that data points can actually reveal what's happening on the grounds to be investigated further. And thank you, Linda, for sharing the global best practices while Prashant Mittalji bringing in a perspective of what's happening at the center in terms of technology deployment. And Professor, thanks for giving us a guidance of how the academia can collaborate to look at data and bring in different additional perspectives. They call data as being the new oil, but I would take pause and say that data is actually the new sun, because oil can be extinguished, data can be reused and repurposed. So let's look at collaborating together, all of us, and making a meaningful M&E using technology. But technology, using a technology without being focused or without having a focus on citizen is of little consequence. To discuss more about that, I invite all of you to join the next session, which is about taking a participatory and citizen-centric approach to monitoring and evaluation. Thank you all of